if they are not provided with these necessary services, they grow up with problem behavior. Problem behaviors depend on social services through adulthood and unable to be employed or to live in their own.
Durante los últimos años, Lawrence ha hecho un esfuerzo importante en mejorar los programas y servicios para estos niños.
Over the past 2 years, Lawrence has put significant effort into improving programs and services for children with autism, and we are grateful for this.
Y nosotros estamos muy agradecidos.
However, we are now just saying that they are very grateful for these services.
Sin embargo, crear un amplio sistema de cambios es difícil y lleva tiempo.
However, create a big system of changes take time and time consuming.
Hemos visto algunos cambios positivos como un resultado de la sociedad del distrito escolar con los expertos en autismo.
We have seen some positive changes as a result of the school district partnership with autism experts.
Pero la mayoría de los cambios han sido solo en unas pocas áreas y en las clases.
But most of the changes has been only in a few areas in classrooms.
Lo cual significa que la mayoría de los estudiantes con autismo se están quedando detrás.
Which means that the majority of students with autism are left behind.
Yo conozco padres aquí en Lawrence de niños autistas que estos niños han sufrido regresiones esencialmente por los servicios inadecuados.
I know of parents in Lawrence whose children with autism have regressed substantially because of the inadequate services.
Algunos niños que pudieran ser incluidos con estudiantes de educación regular han sufrido regresiones hasta el punto de que han sido colocados en clases separadas con niños con necesidades más avanzadas.
Some children who were able to be included with regular education students have regressed to the point where they have been placed in separate classrooms for children with more advanced needs.
Algunos niños con autismo que han trabajado duro por años con ayuda de la escuela para aprender a usar exitosamente el toile han perdido estas habilidades porque su IP no ha sido implementado.
Some children with autism who work so hard for years with support in school to learn to use the toilet successfully have lost these skills because their IEPs were not implemented.
Algunos estudiantes están asistiendo a la escuela sin terapia del habla, aunque este servicio está en su IP.
Some of the students are going without speech therapy, although these services are in their EIP.
Esto debido a la insuficiencia de los empleados y además muchas veces los servicios de terapia del habla han sido terminados debido al comportamiento del niño.
Because of inadequate staffing and in one case speech services were terminated because of the child's behavior.
Algunos padres han sido llamados de la escuela para recoger a sus hijos debido a los problemas de comportamientos. Y a algunos otros padres se le ha dicho que el indeseable comportamiento de su hijo es un resultado de las situaciones en la casa.
Some parents have been called to pick up their children from school because of behavior problems, and some parents have been told that their child's undesirable behavior is a result of situation in the home.
Estos ejemplos ilustran el fracaso de Lawrence en proporcionar los servicios que estos estudiantes necesitan para hacer progreso.
These examples illustrate the failure of Lawrence to provide the services that these students need to make progress, and certainly the failure to provide these students with an education that prepares them to enter society after they leave school.
Y por supuesto, el fracaso para proveer a los estudiantes con una educación que los prepare para entrar a la sociedad después que salgan de la escuela.
Parents realize that it will take time to make changes with the system for all children, not just for students with autism.
Nosotros, como padres, sabemos que llevará tiempo hacer los cambios necesarios en el sistema para todos estos niños. Nosotros no queremos que nuestros hijos se queden detrás.
We don't want our children to left behind with the restructuring effort. It is crucial to include the needs of these children in all restructuring efforts.
Es sumamente importante incluir las necesidades de estos niños en todos los esfuerzos de reestructuración.
It is an important moment to include all the needs of these kids in the restructuration.
Thank you. May I ask if you're close to the end of your comment? Okay, thank you.
Si las escuelas públicas de Lawrence realmente crean un amplio sistema de cambios, no solo se beneficiarán los niños con autismo.
If Lawrence Public Schools really create systems-wide changes, not only will these changes benefit children with autism, but will also be for all the good of all students with and without disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you por escucharme.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you to your interpreter. Next, we're going to hear from Frank McLaughlin from the Lawrence Teachers Union, and Frank's here to talk to us about the receivership. I know. Welcome, Frank. Nice to see you.
Well, I'm Frank McLaughlin, and I'm president of the Lawrence Teachers Union. Good morning and welcome to Lawrence. I want to get right to the point. Lawrence educators desperately want improvements in our schools. We're invested in the school system and in the community. Many of us have given our entire professional lives to Lawrence, and we will be the first to acknowledge that our schools have serious challenges and need dramatic improvements. In fact, we've been asking for help for a very, very long time. However, Lawrence educators and many parents and community members, too, have serious concerns about the approach now being taken by the state. We believe that there is a better approach, one with a proven track record of success. The best way to improve urban schools is a hotly debated topic, and there are several points of view on this issue. One school of thought is what I would call the abandon all hope option. People who embrace this view claim it's impossible for the Lawrence community to improve its schools from within. Therefore, the community should relinquish control of its schools to outside charter operators and the free market. But let's get real. While charter schools in Massachusetts have served a few students well, in general, their educational model relies on a selective enrollment process, high rates of attrition, and an unwillingness to accept mid-year transfers or to fill empty seats. Simply put, charters have not proven that they are a wide-scale solution to the challenges that are facing high poverty, highly mobile urban communities. Now, to its credit, the state is not pursuing full-scale privatization or charterization in Lawrence, at least not yet. Instead, it's taken an approach which I would call dismantle and disband. As laid out in the Commonwealth Magazine article that you all received, the idea is to dismantle the school system and create a system of separate schools, some of which will be run by private management organizations that receive high-priced contracts from the state. All schools will be given MCAS benchmarks. If they fall short, they will be punished, perhaps closed or handed over to a private operator, furthering the collapse of our public schools. But here's the major flaw with this system of schools approach. It destroys a sense of community and collective responsibility for the welfare of our students. It creates winners and losers. It pits school against school in a competition for resources, staff, and the highest achieving students. It says to each school, you're on your own. Forget about collaboration, a common curriculum, or sharing best practices. You need to figure it out for yourselves. And it sets up certain schools to fail, particularly schools that are denied the conditions, supports, resources, and staffing that they need to be effective. The All of a School, which you will hear about today, is a perfect example of long-standing neglect and poor performance, leading to poor performance. However, luckily, there is a third way, a better way, which I call, we're all in this together. This approach recognizes that the community is our greatest asset here in Lawrence. It says that all adults and students in Lawrence have a collective responsibility for improving student learning. It says we need to reject blaming and shaming. Rather, we need to collaborate in a quest for solutions, relying on data and evidence as our guide, not ideology. It says we have to give all stakeholders a real voice in the reform process. This hasn't happened yet under state receivership. The community voice has been silenced. Teacher voice has been marginalized. These voices must be heard. And it says we need to give all schools and all students the conditions, resources, and supports that they need to be successful. We know we can do this. It's already been done. It's been done up the road in Lowell, and you read about it in the AFT Massachusetts newspaper, which is included in your packet. It's been done in Lynn, whose Level 4 schools have seen impressive gains. And it's been done at the Edwards Middle School in Boston, where Jeff Riley was the principal, and where administrators and teachers worked together to bring about a remarkable transformation of a troubled school. True reform rejects magic fixes. Rather, true reform is rooted in enduring values, shared responsibility, teamwork, following the evidence, and respect for teachers as educational experts. True reform is hard work, but it can be done when there is the will to do so. We urge you to support this proven path to success here in Lawrence, because the evidence is overwhelming that this approach gets results. Why should we subject our students to unproven experiments when the real path for real reform is oh so clear? In closing, I say this: let's work together as true partners. Let's base our work on evidence, and let's get the job done for the children of Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, President McLaughlin, good morning. You know, I believe that on the board's agenda is a presentation and discussion about Lawrence. My understanding, and I'd like you to either verify that or tell me this is inaccurate, is that you were invited to be part of that and chose not to. Is that accurate?
Is that accurate? That might be partly accurate. I chose to address the board as the president of the Lawrence Teachers Union, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay. Next we're going to hear from, thank you, Frank. We're going to hear from Diane Frey from the Mass AFT, who's also going to talk to us about the Lawrence receivership. Good morning, Diane.
My name's Diane Frey. I'm a field rep from AFT Massachusetts, and I'm here on behalf of Maureen Santiago and Jamie Riley, who are teachers at the Oliver School here in Lawrence. They couldn't be here, and they asked me to give this testimony on their behalf. The Oliver School was designated a Level 4 school this fall by the state, and both Maureen and Jamie were elected to serve on the Level 4 stakeholder group. We're here today because we want you to better understand the challenges facing the Oliver and what we need to do going forward to serve our students to the very best of our abilities. First, we want to stress that despite all of the challenges, there is much to celebrate at the Oliver. We have great students, great teachers, including several award winners. We also have increasingly involved parents. Still, we are the first to admit that not all our students are being served as well as they can be served. And it leads us to the question, why? If you talk to teachers at our school, you'll hear the same reasons over and over. Inadequate facilities, inadequate staffing and resources, and constant changes in leadership. Most teachers will tell you that the Oliver slide began when we moved to the old Lawrence High School in 2009. The facility, which was built in about 1900, is simply unsuitable for small children, not an environment that's nurturing, and lacks necessities such as a playground, working library, and appropriately sized bathrooms for small children. The building also houses a grade 1 through 12 school for special education students, thereby putting very young students in the same building as young adults with emotional issues. This does not make for a safe learning environment. In many cases, code red lockdowns happen throughout the school and are all too common. Soon after the move to our current location, our student enrollment began to increase significantly, including an increase in special education students resulting from the Olivers assuming the district's inclusion program for autistic students and deaf and hard of hearing students. Many students have also been wavered into the Oliver from other attendance zones across the city. We've included at the end of the packet, at the written testimony in your packets, some enrollment and achievement data to give you some context. We want to be clear. We are a public school and we are public educators. So we embrace the opportunity to serve and educate all students who come to our school. But to be successful, we need stable and consistent leadership, staffing supports. We have not had stable leadership. We have had 7 principals over the last 10 years. Currently, there is only one principal serving over 1,000 students. Furthermore, we have actually seen a decline in some key staffing positions, such as instructional coaches who work with teachers in classrooms. The bottom line is this: we simply do not have enough educators, resources, supports, interventions to address the needs of our students. Teachers clearly expressed these concerns through the TEL survey administered last year. Those results are also attached. These are explanations, but they're not excuses. What do we need to do? If you ask Oliver teachers, they'll tell you it's not rocket science. We need a safe, healthy learning environment for our students. We need adequate staffing, resources, and interventions for students. We need to adopt the same proven practices that other successful Level 4 schools have used. We've included some of these practices at the end of the written testimony. Many of these practices are also highlighted in the department's report called Emerging Practices in Rapid Achievement Gains in Schools. In fact, we've shared a lot of that in our meetings, in our stakeholder meetings, and it's been very useful. Likewise, we need to study and replicate successful schools here in Lawrence, such as the Frost Middle School and right here, the South Lawrence East Elementary School. In closing, we know that the right conditions and strategies in place with those things that we can be successful. We ask that you visit our school, and we're very thankful that some of you are coming to visit our school this afternoon. We ask that you support our efforts to adopt the same proven turnaround strategies that have been successful in other schools. These schools have found what works. We can make that happen too. And finally, we are asking for a chance, a real chance, a fair chance to turn this school around for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for your comments. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just want to publicly thank Diane. Board members may or may not have picked this up, but as part of the processes outlined in state statute in the event of receivership, there's a process that was called for in the statute regarding level 4 schools within the receivership district, and part of that process involved a 3-member, what's called a joint resolution committee panel that is responsible for adjudicating issues between the union and management. And Diane served on that panel. Nobody got rich serving on that panel. In fact, nobody got any money serving on that panel, and it was a very maybe bought some time off your life. So I want to thank you for that effort.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Next, we're going to hear from Anna Javier, who's Parent Leaders in Merrimack Valley, and she's going to talk about creating a transparent educational system. Good morning, Anna, and welcome.
Morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Anna Javier. I'm a parent of 4 high school students in the city of Lawrence. I have my oldest that graduated last year and is now attending college. I've been an involved parent ever since my oldest attended Head Start. Throughout the years, I've been involved in PTOs, school improvement plan, uniform committee, and had the privilege of serving in the stakeholders committee for the level 5 school district. I have learned through experience that parental involvement in my community has been an issue we have not been able to overcome. I am a strong believer that if parents and families engage in their children's education, we would improve in many different ways. Academically, emotionally, and physically are the 3 main reasons why back in 2005, a group of parent volunteers began the idea of forming a nonprofit organization of parent leaders in the Merrimack Valley. It wasn't until this past July when we were able to officially introduce ourselves. We held our kickoff event on October 24th, 2012, where we had over 160 people attend. Ever since that event, we have had several workshops with some local parents, as well as one we did in the city of Lowell. We participated in the celebration of Family Literacy Day, where we were able to speak to 110 parents from our community. After this event, we received numerous calls from parents who are interested in our services, who need help navigating our school system. As I speak to families, I am more convinced that as a community, we need to maintain an active role in the education of our children. We have to help families in order for them to get their children where they need to be. For years, we have not done a good enough job at connecting families and the school system. They felt lost and unmotivated to work hand in hand with our schools. But we, parent leaders in Lawrence, believe it is time for parents and schools to activate their role in our community. Parent leaders in Lawrence is looking to empower the parents in our community in order to help their children succeed in school. We cannot make positive changes in the schools unless we make family engagement top priority. For many years, we've been here, the parents have been there, but we felt out of place. I think it's very important that we start making parental involvement an important piece in the children's education in our cities, because there are a lot of other cities facing the same situation. Lowell faces challenges as well. But I know Lawrence is in the process of reforming, is in the process of making changes, making positive changes, and I just hope that you all consider the fact that for many years we've left parents aside. And I'm not going to say we didn't include them in some areas, but I feel that the parents need to be included in all areas. And I've heard, I need to congratulate, what is her name, Angie Batista, for standing up today as well. I share with her concerns, because we've had many parents that have come up to us and talked to us about the difficult challenges that they're facing in special education and in their IEP plans as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much and for being with us today. Next, we're going to hear from Paul Georges from the United Teachers of Lowell, and he's going to talk to us about successful turnaround strategies. Good morning and welcome, Paul.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I know you've heard the references a couple of times this morning about Lowell and the turnaround that's taken place in Lowell. The turnaround that's taken place in Lowell, particularly at two schools, the Morey School, which was a school that was designated or was never designated as a level 4, but certainly would have been if there hadn't been intervention on the part of the union and Chris Scott, the superintendent of schools at the time. And then later at the Merkland School that was designated level 4 and had the greatest turnaround, fastest turnaround, most significant turnaround in the state last year, to the point where the governor came to the Merkland School to recognize the contribution. In what's happened in those schools, I think it has a story to be told that could be reflective on Lawrence as we look forward, or as we try to do the corrective action at the various schools that are here, particularly the Oliver School, the last school to be designated as level 4. Our involvement came, and I think what happened with the teachers there is there was a clear message from both the union and the superintendent of schools that we had faith in their ability to be able to correct their own course. I became an educator later in my life, and I came because I have a love for this. I had a dedication to it. I grew up in Lowell. The Merkland School was in the neighborhood where I grew up. I knew exactly what those kids were going through and what they were living through, and I had faith in the teachers and the administrators' ability at the Merkland School to make those corrective actions that were necessary that resulted in such great turnaround. But it's carried on beyond that. The most recent test scores coming in Lowell show that there's a significant growth in level 1 schools from 2 schools a year ago to 6 schools now. Level 1 and 2 schools have increased by 2/3. And the superintendent administration, central administration, and the union works hand in hand to try to make sure that this protocol that's been established several years ago is used in the various schools that need the greatest help. The protocol is an AFT protocol that emphasizes it's a 4-part protocol. We have internal capacity now to duplicate that within our own district because we've sent people to New York for the training. People from New York came up for the training. It's based on 4 concepts: enhanced communication. Number 2 is team building. Number 3 is mining data and using significant data to determine the best course and then picking appropriate professional development to address the needs of students. The population in Lowell, the Merkland School, is very similar to what you have in Lawrence. 40% of the kids are second language kids. 75% of the kids at the Merkland School have free or reduced lunches. When you go to the school, and I'd love to invite you to come to the Merkland and the Morey School to talk to the practitioners about what they've done and how they've done it. Ironically, there's some teachers from Lawrence that are now in the Lowell school system. They end up being remarkable teachers. I have no question you have many, many remarkable teachers in the city of Lawrence. If you let them, free them up to be part of the problem solvers. The key component in Lowell, from my perspective, is the empowerment piece. When teachers have a voice in the decisions that are being made of how to correct a school, they not only have more energy to improve, but they also have ownership of the results. I think what's lost in this rhetoric very often about public education and corrective action is the people themselves. I believe in educators. I believe in teachers. They get into this profession not because it's an easy job, not because they're going to become wealthy, because we all know that's not going to happen. So I think it's absolutely blatantly wrong to target teachers as the problem, and too often that happens in this world. When you empower teachers to be the decision makers, along with administration at their school, the results can be remarkable, and we have 2 laboratories to show you in the city of Lowell. I'm asking you, as you look at the Oliver School, as you look at other schools in the city, I know AFT has committed resources to try to bring in the same kind of protocol that was utilized at the Merkel and the Morey and is being used in other schools in Lowell now as we try to correct or make them more efficient, more professional. How can I put it? Become a better source and have better results for our kids. We have a track record that's substantial. We have a track record that's proven. I'm asking you to have that same faith in educators in Lawrence that our superintendent has had and the union leadership has had in Lowell that has such remarkable results. Again, I invite you to come to Lowell, come to any one of our schools, but the Merklin and the Morey in particular, to see the dynamics, the kind of dynamics that take place in that school and the commitment by those teachers. I've talked to teachers before. They said they've never been more exhausted but never felt more fulfilled. And the result of that is our kids are getting a quality education in a system that's improving. When we look at the growth scores for math in the city of Lowell, we're of 29 cities in the state of Massachusetts, we tie for second. Commonwealth schools, we have tied for the highest percentage of level 1 and 2 schools in the state. Those are results that we can all be proud of. When we look at the area schools around us that have a much smaller percentage of second language kids and SPED kids, we are at the top of the heap in math and about a third down in English language arts. That's remarkable for a community that went through such trauma just a few years ago because of budget cuts and loss of personnel. They've kept their eyes on the prize. If you empower teachers to be part of the solution, they will never disappoint you. I'm asking you to take that into consideration when you look forward with the various schools in Lowell that need corrective action. Put a plan together that empowers teachers to be those problem solvers, and I think you will not be disappointed. That's my message, and I thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for being with us. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, again, I would encourage the board during the discussion on the Lawrence game plan to look very, very carefully at the admonition you just received, because I think it's very much based on empowering at the school level decision-making and planning at the school level that involves teachers with administrators. So I think it's very much, the rhetoric at least, sounds exactly what I just heard. So I would encourage the board during the discussion to really hone in on that.
Okay, next we're going to hear from Peter Dolan, who's going to talk to us about the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Peter Dolan. I'm the parent of a Gloucester Middle School student. I'd like to extend a special welcome this morning to the newest board members who are getting their first, but somehow I doubt their last, up-close look at the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School. But I'll skip the other pleasantries before I begin my remarks because there's really nothing pleasant about my having to be here today. I'm the lead plaintiff in the ongoing Dolan v. Chester lawsuit, so I'll leave for another forum on another day any discussion of the birth pains of the school, which were so eloquently described by Secretary Revel in a late-night email to Commissioner Chester as a tough but necessary pill to swallow, but perhaps not nearly as tough as the Secretary might have imagined on that cold February night almost 4 years ago. The school has been sanctioned and reprimanded repeatedly by this board, not to mention the Attorney General. You put it on probation at the end of its first week of school, but you'll be hard-pressed to find any indication that lessons have been learned. Instead, we see what looks like the enabling of an addict, somehow forgiven for each instance of progressively more destructive behavior, and this board, on its way to being remembered as the judge who kept letting the drunk driver off the hook. The latest site visit report presents a troubling picture of life inside one of the most visible Commonwealth charter schools in Massachusetts. Potemkin Village would be a charitable summary. Where is the arts integrated curriculum that was promised in their charter application and touted by Commissioner Chester and Secretary Revel? Arts integrated, the report describes a school whose curriculum is in a state more appropriate for planning 2 years before it opens, not 2.5 years after it opened its doors to students. And forgive me if there are children in the room because I'm about to use the F word. failure to engage students, failure to teach at grade level, and failure to maintain discipline. But what this report tells us about how the department supervises Commonwealth charter schools is as disturbing as what it tells us about the failures of the school itself. A year and a half after the deadline, the school's accountability plan, theoretically a key component of the school's evaluation, remains in draft form, with massive turnover of staff on their third principal in 3 years. When exactly do they get to stop revising their performance goals? And on page 1 of the report, we see that the evaluation team was made up of charter school office staff and heads of 2 other charter schools. And for you new board members, buckle up, because we're about to go down the rabbit hole. You heard about the loan to Deanna Lamb, a 3-week loan with state funds provided as collateral at a rate of return that would make a loan shark blush. You would think that with only 2 outside members on the evaluation panel, someone in the department might have been able to take a minute to ask Deanna Lamb if she had any relationships, financial or otherwise, with the Gloucester Charter School before they made her one of the evaluators. It gets even murkier, because Ms. Lamb has freely admitted that it was her brother who loaned money to the school, even though her name and not his appears on the promissory note. Brothers, what can you do with them? You know, my congressman's wife could tell you their finances can get you into hot water. But there are protocols to guard against corruption and conflict of interest. Chair Banta disclosed her brother's financial connection to the charter school quite properly. The investigations into this transaction, how a public school was able to borrow money this way, have only just begun. But we're left wondering, would the report have been even worse with different evaluators? And if the department can't ask basic ethical questions of its evaluators, what other awkward relationships exist out in the world of Commonwealth charter schools? 2 things are painfully clear. It's time to end the costly and risky experiment known as the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School, and it's time state and maybe federal authorities take a long, hard look at how Commonwealth charter schools are being supervised. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we're going to hear from Val Gilman, and Val's here to talk to us about the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School as well. Val is on crutches, having broken her ankle, so we're going to give her a minute. Are you sure you don't want us to bring you a mic? Okay.
Oh my gosh, such real treatment.
Nice.
My husband did this when I was at home. Oh, that's on tape. That's terrible.
That's okay.
I'm in trouble.
He may not watch this tape, Val. I don't know. Nice to see you again. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson Banta, Commissioner, Secretary, new members of the board. I developed a prepared speech, but it's stuck in my boot, so I thought I would speak for a moment from the heart. I'm here not to reiterate the 30-page audit report. I know that you've done your job under the leadership of Jeff Wilson, and I know that that will become a rigorous discussion later on. I do want to let this board know of several concerns that I have and then an ask. My concerns primarily are in the areas of the whole planning process of charter schools. When the charter in Gloucester escalates their numbers, it creates harm for the children of Gloucester, the 3,100 remaining public school children. It's basically works like 197 is what they commit to the state, and then 123 is what shows up in October. What happens is that money is held up. It's held up, it's given to the charter school, then they have to cut, and the city of Gloucester, that number is almost held up in escrow, and by the time it comes back to us from the Department of Revenue, what happens is that we've already done our planning for that whole year. The planning is all over with. So if we need remedial math specialists, remedial literacy specialists, we've had our time, and it's already halfway through the year. So I believe that that is a challenge that I would like to throw out there for this board, who governs and oversights or provides oversight to charter schools of something that is a huge issue. I also want to let this board know of a surprise that I learned several months ago, and that is that formula that was so much an important part of trying to get districts to buy into having a Commonwealth charter school in our city. The formula of 100, 25, 25, 25, 25, 20. It was supposed to be a richer formula than the old one. That formula now is only 74% funded. That came as a complete surprise to us. And that's going to amount to $275,000 in shortfall once again for our district. The third thing I wanted to mention to you is my concern, and I'm sure, knowing that so many members of the charter school are here, a concern that they would share as well, and that is when 90% of the kids that are graduating from 8th grade from the charter school enter Gloucester High, when 90% are not proficient in math, it creates additional concerns for our district because those kids are coming into our high school, they're a year behind in math, possibly more. We don't have the staff in terms of remedial math specialists to really create that environment where we can get them up to speed. And you need to understand and empathize with us in our district in terms of those concerns. I truly feel sorry for those kids. And our teachers are left without the resources to be able to work so hard to get them up to speed. So that is a concern as well. And then finally is, on a positive note, I want to share with you all the wonderful innovation school that we've been able to establish at our middle school. I understand that there are now 44 innovation schools in Massachusetts, 29 new ones that have been approved. That is the solution, in my feeling, in my humble opinion. Secretary, thank you for your work on creating that path. Bridget Rodriguez has been a gem to work with. And with the help of our GTA, our Gloucester Teachers Association, I'm delighted that Jill Coleman's here from the MTA. The support that our teachers gave us at our middle school, we received a unanimous school committee vote of approval. And what's happened now is that we've taken the areas in the Common Core that we know that we needed to improve, and we've become a STEM project-oriented middle school, and it's so exciting. Our teachers are working together, they're collaborating, and all this came at a cost of $600,000 from the Gates Foundation and $1.5 million from Race to the Top funds. This is not a money drag on districts. It is the way to go, and it empowers teachers who know best what to do. So I ask this board, as you deliberate today, to be sensitive to the non-charter school students in Massachusetts, continue to promote this wonderful new innovation program, and help us help all the kids in our communities. Thanks.
Comments. Next, we're going to hear from James Cavestan, and James is from the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School Board of Trustees. Welcome, James. Thank you for being with us.
Chair Benton, Commissioner Chester, Vice Chair Holmes, Secretary Reville, and members of the board, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak here this morning. Commissioner Chester, in your November 16th update, you stated that you have never had more serious concerns about the school's viability. We acknowledge and understand those concerns as they impact the school. We have made plans to ensure the school's viability and success. First, in terms of the matter about enrollment and how that impacts the school's financial viability, we had very serious negative press over the summer concerning unfounded allegations. The board, for 2 months, allowed for information to come in to cite any specific allegations. Absolutely nothing came in. In spite of that, the negative PR had its effect on enrollment. To counter the low enrollment, we've begun an enrollment campaign bringing families to the school to visit the school. We've had 2 open houses. The first one brought in 3 new students who are currently enrolled. The second one brought in 10 visitors for enrollment next year, and visitors are the key to increasing enrollment. Also, with the opening of grades K through 1, we've had 26 new students come into the school, and we expect continued interest next year, again, in the kindergarten and first grades, where we build our base for the future viability and enrollment of the school. To stabilize finance, we have recently secured a $200,000 line of credit from a regional bank. And I'd just like to speak about the issue of credit and loans. The board, a long time ago, in its governance and oversight, granted authority to our executive director to enter into, negotiate, and complete financial transactions that were necessary for the school's financial functioning. At that time, on account of the lawsuit and kind of another lender finding that we were too young or a startup without history, we were rejected by several banks. At that point, the executive director was able to find a individual lender, and again, I think he was properly exercising his authority to enter into a financial obligation for the school that would help keep the school current on its financial obligations. On other financial matters, we have established a foundation, and we have received verbal commitments for $70,000 this year and $30,000 next year, and we're also discussing another gift of $40,000 for next year. We're very, very fortunate because in the past, when we have needed some that buffer that you talked about in your report about how things may arise because budgets change all the time, we've been able to ask our landlord for rent concessions, and he has agreed to that, to do whatever is necessary to keep the program intact. And this is the whole key. These financial steps will ensure that we maintain and excel in program viability by maintaining full faculty and staff. As the Commissioner noted, we have made substantial progress with the IEP services, with the addition of a licensed special education director, 2 full-time special ed teachers, 4 full-time special education aides to support 24 students on special education IEPs, and then a full-time school counselor. And I would also like to say that we have made significant progress in the MCAS, especially in the ELAs. In our ELA MCAS, just for example, because we started with kids from the middle school who came from the district, our 2012 grade 6 had 81% improvement, over 43% proficiency and advancement the year before. Our 2012 grade 7 had a 68% proficiency and advancement, over 52% in 2011, and our 2012 grade 8 had an 85% proficiency and advancement, over 70% in 2011. Like other district and charter schools, we still need to improve math and sciences, and we have brought in new staff to treat that. We've faced formidable obstacles over the last 3 years, but we've also put plans together to make progress, especially in the critical areas of trying to create the culture for a high-functioning school that fosters creativity, learning, and vigor. Our new educational director, Beth Del Forge, comes to the school holding a principal and assistant certification for levels pre-K through 6, as well as a superintendent and assistant superintendent certification for all levels. And I would say that the DESE site visit was conducted in month 25 of the school's operating history to really see the full effect of the full program and full staff we have. I think we would invite the school to come and do another visit at the end of the year. I thank you very much for your time, and I thank you much for your support of the school. And Beth will be speaking shortly after me, so you'll get a chance to meet her. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for your comments. So our last person for public comment is Beth Del Forge. Beth, welcome, and we're glad to have you with us today. Good morning.
My name is Beth Del Forge. I'm the Director of Education at the Charter School and come with 27 years in public education. I would like to take my time to emphasize our efforts and plans for addressing the concerns of the Commissioner's report and the site visit report. I came to the school because of its commitment to arts integration and community, and how they would, how these areas of study would enrich learning in meaningful ways. My attention since August has been to build a school culture that reflects teacher and student voices, assesses what the school's strengths and weaknesses are, build relationships, develop structures and systems to follow, and now move a school forward into action. My vision is to build a school that is reflective, not reactionary, collaborative in spirit and thinking, and driven by inquiry and creativity. How can the arts and community be integral in rigorous and engaging learning? To get there, we have a lot of work to do, though we have begun. We have rebuilt and restaffed the special ed department. A child study team and a behavior team is now in place. Title I services and other grant opportunities are in place to provide further services for our students by training teachers in foundations, conceptual problem solving in math, and honing analytical skills with MCAS data to help identify student gaps and progress. Parents receive a weekly communication. I send out a multi-page letter called the Monday Memo, which includes photos of students at work, information and descriptions of ongoing work. The faculty has designed 2 Saturday school days in the last 2 months, which are opportunities for students to learn in a different workshop model, and is framed as an open house for prospective parents and children to see the school in action. Parents are invited into classrooms to experience a morning meeting firsthand, and parent workshops have been designed with topics such as bullying and how to support your student with math education. One Saturday school theme centered around the culture of Gloucester, and the second highlighted different community service workshops. Since the site visit in October, we have built a student behavior contract. It describes 3 areas to uphold: respect of self, others, and environment, be here and present as a student, and be safe. We listened to feedback from the site visit report that mentioned our language around rules from classroom to classroom was not consistent enough, and we are now rectifying that with the inclusion of the student behavior contract and subsequent conversations with students. We also have a student leadership team made up of representatives from grade 4 through 8 who meet with a faculty member and meet weekly during a lunch meeting to discuss school spirit, school culture, and school leadership. Presently, they are forming a fun night for students, support for Hurricane Sandy victims, and developing the Respect Club to acknowledge students who are making a positive difference behaviorally, socially, and intellectually at the school. The school's adult leadership team and grade-level teachers meet with me weekly. The faculty and I meet every Wednesday afternoon for 3 hours for professional development. We discuss and analyze videos of exemplary teaching, discuss research, work through protocols to look at student work, and try on different thinking routines before putting them into practice into the classroom. In the month of December, our focus is on developing a broad view, mapping document that identifies themes, topics, essential questions, and timelines for curriculum development for the whole school year, before creating a more detailed mapping document including objectives, standards, arts integration, and more. All teachers and administrators have set goals for the year. Formal and informal observations have begun. Arts integration is evident in the classrooms and now out into the community. Recently, we have partnered with Endicott College, where our students attended a visual arts exhibit and watched a musical performance at the college's Performing Arts Center. Our kindergarten and first grade students are involved in a singing and sign language residency with artists in residence who come into the classroom in preparation before visiting older friends at a neighboring senior citizen daycare where young and old will sing and sign together. As part of the 8th grade orientation in August, we had a project adventure experience as well as an artistic movement experience for our oldest students to bond, learn about leadership, and to take physical risks as athletes and dancers. Teachers jumped into the experience by having their own movement workshop, and both groups performed for each other and in front of an audience as a culminating experience. I hope this gives you a sense of our current work and our commitment to develop a viable school at Gloucester Community Arts Charter School.
Thank you, Beth, for your comments and for being with us here this morning. That ends the public comment period. Just for board members' information, we're going to take a break at approximately 11 o'clock. We're going to go through items number 1 and 2 on the regular agenda. If anyone needs to take a quick stretch break, please do so, but I'm going to keep us on track, as is my responsibility to do so. So next is the recap of the special meeting we had last night on the Level 4 schools. And I'd like to make some comments, but I'd also like to turn to my fellow board members who were able to be there and ask for them to comment as well. It was a terrific meeting. I often say that after a special meeting, but I really felt last night it was just amazing. I want to thank Linda Foisey and her team for putting together a very coherent plan, both listening to the department about rationale, sustainability, and listening to the field in the persons of 3 very impressive superintendents. So first, we had an overview of the thoughtful process that the department goes through as they make a recommendation to the commissioner to think about whether or not these schools in year 3 of being level 4 should exit level 4. Should they go into 1, 2, or 3? Should they stay level 4? Should they go to level 5? And what was insightful for me to hear was it's not all about academic results. It has a lot to do with academics. It has a lot to do with school conditions. And it has a lot to do with what's going on at the district. So the lesson here is really sustainability of improvement, not a point-in-time intervention, not a group of programs coming in and being helpful for a point of time, but how do you look at those programs and decide which ones you're going to fund and invest in going into the future. Focus on what is best. We heard from the 3 superintendents, and while they admitted that no one is really happy to have a level 4 school and be called a level 4 district, the 3 of them said the same thing. It was Meg Mayo Brown from Fall River, Jean Franco from Lowell, and Melinda Boone from Worcester. They all talked about the significance and power of leadership. They all talked about the power of extra time and how you use the extra time, not just having extra time. And they all talk about focused and very strategic PD. So they talked about changing their systems from within the systems. They talked about maximizing the talent they have and helping teachers to maximize their own strength. They also talked about the value of the school liaisons that the department provides the schools. And this was very timely for me because I had just come along with Ryan from the budget subcommittee meeting, and we talked about things we need to prioritize going forward. And the commissioner and Bill Bell said, we really need more funding for assistance. It's so important. And being a business person, I said, yes, I get that it's important, but I first need to know what kind of difference it's making. What would your stakeholders say about assistance? 2 hours later, I had my answer. So I don't know if that was a plant, but it was very well executed by all. So let me stop my comments by returning to thanking Linda and her very accomplished team. If you weren't at the table last night, I know many of you have worked in the background to make so much of this good work possible. So I want to thank you. Now I'd like to turn to fellow board members who were there and ask you if you'd like to make additional comments about the session.
I don't know if this is on. So I'll just talk loudly.
It's on, Penny.
It was on, okay. I agree with Maura that one of the things I thought was most interesting about the meeting was the focus on the school and district conditions required to keep emerging schools from slipping backward. And also the answers to questions we asked about what made the difference in schools that really did progress versus schools that didn't. And a couple of areas that came up were strong leadership and consistent leadership, which is something we've heard a little bit about today, sometimes in the LAC, and communication and use of data, and finally, perhaps a building of belief and expectations among all the stakeholders, students and teachers and parents alike.
Thank you. Yes, Harneen.
I had a question, but first a comment. I thought the superintendent presentation was really interesting and really worthwhile to hear. And like Penny, it was interesting how much the superintendents all focused on the issue of leadership as central for any turnaround effort and for the success of a turnaround effort, and their own challenges at identifying and retaining strong leaders that could fill those positions and stay and do the necessary work to lead the teams. So it was just interesting to hear that. And I thought the Lowell situation, she talked a lot about, I don't remember everybody's name, the superintendent there spoke a lot about the impact it's had on their other schools and how the district has really kind of broadened to replicate a lot of the practices from that school to their whole district-wide kind of professional development, and to the role, I think she talked about communication and leadership and sustained leadership at the school level and the district level. And I think from as we think about Lawrence and this whole discussion about how we think the role of the district and the role of the district in supporting and sustaining this kind of effort and replicating, I thought that was a very interesting description of it, very positive in terms of looking at the labor management piece, but also in looking at kind of how they've engaged those values, which I know is one of the embedded those values, which is one of the issues the commissioner, I guess, you're going to be looking at to determine the other piece, which is should a school, level 4 school exit, or what should their next step be? So my question about that is, it was a lot to kind of go over, and maybe it would be useful at some point to understand it again, all the different components with the MAGs, the MSV, and kind of how that's all being weighted. I wasn't totally clear. It seemed like a lot of data. I know it's up to you kind of where everybody's going, but I think maybe it might be useful at some point to have a little more discussion about it on the full board, maybe in this capacity. But my question was, if one of these schools becomes a level 5 school, if your determination is that they haven't met the those green, the embedded, this chart, so that we don't, they're all red or they're down at the bottom or whatever. What does that mean for the district? Because the district's level is the level of their lowest school, right? So what would that mean for this board and for, how will that, what's the plan about in that, if that happens?
Yeah, for the chair, great question. So that is the exception to the district's level being the lowest level. Deciding to declare a school level 5 and thus the state takes receivership of the school does not automatically mean that the district is going to be level 5 and the state will take receivership.
Right,
so that's a really important
that.
clarification. Okay. I do, just to build on your comments, Harney, I do think this needs more discussion. This was kind of an initial exposure, and not everybody was able to be there. I did point out for the board members who weren't there, but particularly I think Ruth and Gerald, who have the longevity. One of the things that I hope you appreciate when you do get your arms around this is kind of the through line from earlier discussions that we had as a board about the essential conditions for school effectiveness, about district hallmarks of a robust, successful district, and those are very much embedded. And Harneen's referring to 3 basics criteria that will go into the mix at the end of a 3-year turnaround plan for a school. One is what do the outcomes look like? Are students learning better, achieving better? If it's a high school, are they persisting? Are we seeing a change in dropout rates? The second is around what's the evidence that the school, in fact, is incorporating those essential elements, those conditions, conditions of effectiveness. The third piece is looking at the district, because we believe that in order to sustain, in the case of a level 4 school that's done really well, that the district's got a central role in that, and that it would be much too easy for a school to slip backward if in fact the district doesn't have the conditions in place to ensure success going forward. So I think your comment is right on in terms of bringing this back to the board at a future time.
Thank you. Yes, and I truly regret that I was not able to join the board last night, because obviously really wanted to hear the presentation, so I try to get myself up to speed with the materials and then have additional questions. But in just glancing the materials really quickly, I was wondering, in the Proficiency Gap Committee, we've been talking a lot about the PPI and how we use that measure to close the proficiency gap. So maybe you touched upon this last night, but how is that integrated here? Is the MAGs equivalent to the PPI? Where are the overlaps, if any? And how are we taking the proficiency gap closing into consideration for determining if schools are moving out of level 4.
So we didn't drill down into a lot of detail on that, but proficiency gap closing is critical in these determinations. So it's not just looking at what's happening in the aggregate in the level 4 schools, but it's also looking at the high needs subgroups and looking at their progress over time. So that's absolutely central to the decisions on the schools.
So is it part of the...
It's part of the calculus for looking at whether the degree of the level of progress is being made and the degree to which gaps are closing.
Comment or question?
Yeah, one comment and a couple of points to make about the discussion last night. I do think that was, I agree with you. There was a very substantive discussion on an important matter that we need to talk about here, and there are huge implications in terms of the future for other schools coming to be classified as such, and what happens to the schools that move out of this classification, whether into level 5 or back into the mainstream. 3 interesting questions that I think need further exploration. Number one, the impact on the rest of the district of extraordinary measures that are taken to support the schools that are in level 4 status. So as we look at what we're examining with respect to what have been the key strategies that have meant success or determined the failure of schools where we've had extraordinary interventions, I hope that we can look beyond to see what's the impact on other schools. Secondly, I was struck by the power of the evaluation and the work we're doing on the evaluation system as we talk about one of the impacts is the movement of teachers. And it makes a big difference if you can count on teachers having been well evaluated and given all the help they need to develop their practice to the highest possible levels. Then that movement maybe is less consequential than in some instances it's been described to me. And then thirdly, and perhaps most interesting, is the financial complications associated with leaving status here. I think one of the things that we've done well in this chapter of turnaround work in the Commonwealth, and with the help of partners in federal government, been able to provide substantial financial resources to those schools that have been designated as in turnaround status to enable them to put in place strategies to build not just capacity, but to build programs that better serve the students in those schools. And we talked a lot last night about the implications of withdrawing that support, and how one of the criteria for looking at these schools will be the kind of plan that they've developed with respect to how do they continue some of those services and supports, especially the ones that have been found to be most successful. And I think that's going to be challenging for us. It is challenging also to think about what's the paradigm that we're using. Is the paradigm one size fits all and all schools need to be funded at the exact same level to provide the exact same set of services to all students? Or, as we're seeing in this case, do certain schools have certain needs, and those needs are more or less permanent rather than needs that we can meet for 3 years and then withdraw support from? So I think there's some very interesting sort of philosophical considerations here with respect to our long-term strategy on what we're doing to close achievement gaps, and I hope we have more time to take a look at that in the future.
So noted. I think we will. Okay. I think we're going to move to item number 2. Thank you, fellow board members, for your comments, and again, thank you to the staff. So now the main focus of today, we're here in Lawrence, and we're going to get an update on Lawrence. And so I believe that Jeff Riley and Alan Zaffron and others are going to join us at the table. Scott Gibbon, I believe, is here. I'm not sure who exactly is coming to the table, but I'm going to turn it right over to the commissioner to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So as I said in my initial comments this morning, this is the 1-year anniversary of the board's vote to take receivership of the Lawrence School District. It's worth remembering why I recommended that and why you supported that, and supported it very strongly. The district-wide performance, by any objective measures that we had of student learning, were incredibly low. In fact, in district-wide performance in the LA in math was among the bottom 1% in the Commonwealth. Less than one-half of Lawrence students were graduating from high school within 4 years. This was the lowest graduation rate of any non-charter district in the state. You have charter schools that serve at-risk populations, dropout recovery, and so I said had lower. 3/4 of the schools in Lawrence had experienced declines in the year prior to when we took that vote. And Lawrence had 6 level 4 schools at that point in time out of the 28 schools total in the district. In addition, the district was operating with an interim superintendent and had been for a couple of years, had done a search for a superintendent and had failed to agree on a candidate. The most recent permanent superintendent at that point in time was under indictment and has since been convicted of conduct related to his superintendency. And we had extensive documentation of a governance structure and school committee that was, I think, quite dysfunctional. And it was under those circumstances that I felt that nothing short of receivership would provide the authorities and the ability to have a real decent shot at turning things around. And I said to you at the time that my intent in making the recommendation to you was not that we would stabilize governance and get out of Lawrence as fast as we can, because we might have been able to accomplish that in a relatively short amount of time, but that my intent was to transform this school district from one where a strong education was no longer the exception, but was now the rule for students coming through. And I was very clear that this was not an indictment of the staff, the community, the teachers, the administrators. Nobody intended to have this district land in the situation it was in. That was not the goal of anybody working here. And in fact, there were many and are many pockets of excellence in this school district. But the school district, over a long period of time, has been unable to transform those pockets of excellence into the routine as opposed to the exception. Once you took the vote, I began the search for a receiver. I appointed Jeff Riley in January, I believe, or maybe in December. And Jeff will remind me. I'm sure he remembers those dates. And Jeff began, I think, in late January or early February. And you're going to get an update from Jeff as to what's transpired. I mean, I think he's moved with incredible sense of urgency. Part of the reason I selected him. He's an impatient man and somebody who believes very strongly that what we owe our children is something that we can't sit around and wait on. We need to move on and move decisively, and we owe it to our young people to give them the best opportunities possible. And he has done that. He's used the last half of the 2011-12 school year to assess the situation, assess staffing, assess leadership in schools. He's identified some partners to come in, and you're going to hear from some of them today, to support the turnaround in some of the lowest performing schools in the district. There's a game plan underway to really, in my mind, the crux of what Jeff's put on the table here is an opportunity for empowerment of educators on the local level. Very much gives to schools the ability to take their fate and their direction into their own hands and craft a new game plan going forward. I think it's very exciting. I think it's very disruptive, incredibly disruptive. it really sort of flies in the face of the way in which we've typically done business in a school district. I mean, it really raises fundamental questions about, for example, the role of a collective bargaining agreement, which often, in part, is designed to standardize working conditions and salaries and so forth. And here we're looking at a district that seeks to empower at the school level folks to figure out how to go about business, which is sort of antithetical to standardizing those conditions. And so, I don't claim that we've figured everything out. This is very much a work in progress. But this is a chance for you to look over the shoulder of those who are doing the work and get a glimpse of where we've been and where we're headed, ask questions, and we will keep you updated on this as we go forward. So, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Before beginning, I'd like to recognize two members, I think, of the audience who are still here, two of our school committee members, Frank Cirillo and Matilde Santos. Without question, they've been probably the two most actively involved school committee members, touring the schools with me on a regular basis, helping to write grants, including a Celtics grant, which they will be refurbishing our gym at the Bruce School in excess of $50,000 or $60,000. They helped to work on that with us. They've helped on facilities upgrades. So I'd ask if they're still here, if they could stand for a minute. Thank you. We appreciate their continued work. When I came here today, I wanted to think about how to frame it and how to begin. And I guess what I'd like to talk to you about is my children, or are my children. I have two children, one who is a typically performing fourth grader and a daughter with some significant special needs that require her to be in a special classroom. My son, my fourth grader, things are easy for him, and sometimes too easy for him. But for my daughter, school is a struggle. And last night, like almost every night when I come home, regardless of the hour, my daughter says this to me: "Daddy, I want to play school." Now, Daddy has had a lot of school during the day. But Daddy will play school, mostly because my daughter loves to go to school. She has an amazing teacher. And that's what I want for the Lawrence schools. I want amazing schools, amazing teachers. And we have a lot of great people already. Let me be clear. I have issues with my daughter's lesson plans. Too often they seem spontaneous and not well thought out. Her content objectives are rudimentary, and her system for tracking data is non-existent at this point. But we are going to work on that with her. But a child who really has a hard time with learning has a teacher that she loves and who she mimics and imitates and loves going to school. That has not always been the case. So I wanted to begin with that because at the end of the day, the only thing I care about is great schools for Lawrence. That's all we want to do. I'm not particularly interested in the union versus the charter argument. I'm not particularly interested in whole language versus phonics. I'm interested in getting the job done. I believe, by the way, that it can only get done in a decentralized system where individual schools are empowered to find the solutions for themselves. It is no secret when I was a principal in Boston that I wasn't always toting the company line, and that I did what I thought was best for my kids. And rather than make it an obstacle for principals, teachers, and parents to do what they think is right, we want to give them the resources and give them the green light to get that done. And that is the fundamental basis for what this turnaround plan is about. We've seen the typical turnaround plan all across this country, a top-down, Darth Vader, bureaucratic model that has never worked. And we are trying something radically different in the belief that the people on the ground can figure out the answers. I'm going to go through this PowerPoint quickly. I know we're way behind on time, but I just wanted to kind of give you some background. Fundamentally, our vision is that we're going to see effective instruction in every lesson, in every classroom, in every school, every day, propelling our kids to do great things. There are 6 overarching themes of the turnaround plan. One is combining the best of Lawrence with the best of the Commonwealth. This school district, in many ways, got a bad rap because when I came, what I found was there are many exceptional educators on the ground already. With that said, we have areas of weakness where we brought in outside partners, particularly at our turnaround schools, to try to help us. Some of these partners were charter schools. Some of them were former AFT members who were AFT grant winners who are now leading schools as principals. We've been in discussions, light discussions, with the union about a possible union school to come on in. And that is something, although it's in its infancy, that is of interest to me. We want great schools for Lawrence. We want to empower our principals, teachers, parents in the community. A lot of people say that parents don't care about their kids in Lawrence. I fight against that all the time. We had incredible numbers of parents just the other night at our high school back-to-school night, so much so that there was no more parking, and parking became a huge issue. Hundreds upon hundreds of parents of high school students came out to support their kids, and we look forward to continue working with them. We need to use our resources wisely. We are one of the few school districts in Massachusetts that doesn't meet its foundation budget, and we'll talk about that briefly later, why. But the reality is this Level 5 district not only was not granted additional resources when it became Level 5, it actually doesn't get the foundational support money it's supposed to get. And so we need to be very careful about how we use our resources. We want to implement with urgency, not at the expense of quality, but we recognize that there's much to get done. And at the end of the day, it's all about results. To that end, we have some fairly significant goals. We're trying to double the number of schools that are closing the achievement gap after this year. Within 3 years, we want to be in the top 5 of all gateway schools. And after 5 to 7 years, we're looking to eliminate the proficiency gap with the state average with all of our students. With all of that said, we want to exit receivership with a sustainable embedded system that is ready and able to move forward. I won't dwell too much on the numbers, but right now we only have 3 schools that are closing the achievement gaps in both math and English on a consistent basis. Next year, our goal is to have 6 or more. I guess underpinning this turnaround plan are 4 key strategies. We're extending the time, using data and high expectations to get there. We're recruiting good people, retaining and cultivating our great people that are already here. We're supporting and engaging our kids, and we're looking to increase the autonomy at the school level for principals and teachers. Why we've done this. I won't go into great detail because the commissioner kind of laid out how we came to receivership, but at the end of the day, the test scores have been flat and low consistently. Even for the last 2 years, you see very low proficiency rates and student growth. One of the things we need to do is try to do that in an area where we're not getting all of the funding that I think we need to really service our kids. Currently, the City of Lawrence exercises its legal authority to only fund within the 95% level of net school spending. So while most school districts fund at 100%, we are closer to 98 or 97%. As a caveat, many school districts, as you know, fund well above the 100% level. Some 110, 120, even 130%. So the good news in the newspaper today was that there's a surplus in the City of Lawrence. And so we're excited to try to get ourselves back up to our foundation budget and to 100% of the dollars that we think our students desperately need.
For 1 second. And Jeff Wilson, just if I misspeak, I'd like you to just clarify, but just so the board understands. So Lawrence's total foundation obligation is $162 million. The state, through our Chapter 70 formula, because the way our formula is designed in high needs districts with little ability to raise local revenue, we pay a greater percentage of the share. So the state pays well over 90% of that $162 million. So that total amount flows to Lawrence. That's fully funded. The local share in this case is $10 million. In the current budget, the city has allocated $6 million. They're allocating less than the share. So Lawrence is, I'm going to say, Jeff, maybe one of a dozen or two in the state that are being funded below their foundation level. In each case, I think, again, Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong, in each case where we have a district that's funded below, it's not because of the state's contribution, it's because of the city contribution to the budget. One of the ironies here is that Lawrence has some extra state oversight over the city finances because the legislature floated them a loan 2 years ago or so. And so, needless to say, we're working hard behind the scenes to try to get that full funding from the city side secured. So I just wanted to make sure you understood how the funding formula works and where those figures are coming from.
Thank you. So briefly, the Oliver School was named as a Level 4 school recently. We do have a stakeholder group. We're anxiously awaiting their recommendations before we make decisions. You can see the list of meetings, and I believe some of you may have the opportunity to go tour that school this afternoon. As with many of our buildings in Lawrence, we've set aside a significant amount of money to try to repair some of the aging buildings. At that particular school, you'll see whole classrooms that have been fixed, patches to roofs, and other things that we've done to try to bring it back up to spec. That among many other schools that are facing the same issues. Where we are so far. Our priorities to achieve our first-year goals. Number one, we want to successfully execute the school planning year. Right now, principals have been training with me on how to increase the school day. They will be rolling that out to their school communities in the coming days. We've integrated our EMOs, typically in a phase-in model. You'll hear from one of them today about that process at our lowest performing schools. We're going to execute acceleration academies in February and April over the vacations to target our most needy students to get an adrenaline shot, if you will, of great instruction in English and math. This is a program that matches students that need extra help with our best teachers, not just from Lawrence, but from across the country. Because we believe in teachers deeply, we've created something called the Sontag Prize in Urban Education, where they are rewarded and given professional development at the Harvard Business and Ed schools. This has become quite a competitive award. Several people from Lawrence won it last year and worked in Boston. This year, the academies are coming to Lawrence, and we'll provide you with more information as that program rolls out. But that is, it's a way to both honor and reward our most outstanding educators here in Lawrence and across the country who work in city schools. We've implemented the new teacher evaluation system using TeachPoint, a computer-based model, to help cut down on a lot of the extra paper and to increase effectiveness. We've increased attendance and engagement of our students. We've worked hard to kind of really roll out a communication plan to improve the perception of our schools. Whether that's being ads in the newspapers, ConnectEd, the new Parent Information Center that's starting in January, school committee meetings, etc. We've really been out there trying to get our message out to folks. And those are kind of the big highlights for where we are. I'll go into them in a little bit more detail, but I recognize there's time for other presenters and questions. As you know, schools are being asked to increase the amount of time that students spend here in Lawrence for the next school year. We've asked individual schools to come up with their own plans, offering them PD and guidance to help figure that out. Right now, the principals have been trained. They'll be training the teachers and parents about what is the model that's best for you. We're not telling people exactly how they have to get there. We're giving them a target and saying, you figure out what is best for you and your school community and what that will look like, including the school site councils. Some of our partners that have come in are here today. We have Scott Given from Unlocking Potential to my left. We have Alan Safran from Match Education to my right. They're going to talk about some of the EMO process and progress that's been made so far. The Acceleration Academies are underway. They're being planned. We've already had a large number of teachers apply. We're excited to continue that program and really recognize great teaching everywhere it happens inside Lawrence. The educational evaluation system, all principals have been trained for 2 full days on the system. We're going to be rolling out the training across the board, all over the system, which should be a great way for us to adopt this new system, but also to do it in an effective and efficient manner. We're working with the union to try to make sure that this is a process that works for them too. We think because it's so new, we want to get it right in the beginning and work out any bugs early. Early indications of success, we've had some strong attendance gains in the first few months compared to the last several years. You see particular gains everywhere, but in particular at the high school, the attendance rate has increased. A lot of great work done by Juan Rodriguez and Michael Qualter, the headmaster there, and the building principals to work with students, to track students, to get them in school at the beginning of the year. That will continue. One of the things I want to talk about briefly when we talk about the communication and district perception is our new Family Welcome Center. We hope to have that opened at the central office in the new school year. We've already begun the process of moving our HR department out of the first floor so that parents can have easy access to that system. We want parents to have a place where they can kind of do one-stop shopping, whether it's after-school programs, registration, special education help, you name it. We want to make it friendly and welcoming for parents, and we're excited to have that up and running in the new year. Other initiatives are on their way. Facilities we talked about briefly. Chris Molino's staff has done a great job of bringing back many of our buildings, which are in tough shape. We've poured significant dollars, including a waiver that we were granted from the state, in order to fix some of our buildings. That work is ongoing and will continue. Some of you heard earlier about ANET and different formative assessment systems we're looking at to use data to inform instruction. Sid Smith, former superintendent of the Malden Public Schools, is helping us with curriculum maps under the leadership of Dale Lipkin. We're continuing the process of collective bargaining with Frank McLaughlin and the AFT. We're looking at performance-based compensation measures, and we hope to present some of that to the union in the coming days. Resource allocation to ensure a strategic on-time budget. We talked about the money. I don't know much about the details of fiscal policy, but I know that if you don't drive your budget drives you. And at a time of declining resources, we have to be really up to par on what we're trying to get done and where we deploy our resources. And central office redesign to support the school autonomy. Our hope is that we're going to move some of our central office staffing out into the schools. We may trim part of the central office to put even more resources at the school level for the principals and teachers. I apologize for running through that very quickly, but I know we are under time constraints here. I did want to take a few moments to introduce a few people who are going to talk about their programs and how they've been so far. First is Scott Given. Scott is the CEO of Unlocking Potential, and he's going to talk to you about the work in Lawrence and other places.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Jeff. Like Jeff said, my name is Scott Given, and I'm the founder and CEO of Unlocking Potential, a nonprofit school turnaround organization. We currently manage 2 schools, Up Academy Charter School of Boston and Up Academy Lawrence Middle School. Up Academy Charter School of Boston is an in-district Horace Mann charter school. It represented the restart of the Level 3 Gavin Middle School. Our school opened in fall 2011 to roughly 480 students. After 1 year that the school's results are in, student proficiency rates roughly doubled relative to the Gavin Middle School. Our school's median student growth percentile in math was 86. This was the highest median student growth percentile of any middle school in the state. And we did this while retaining the vast majority of students who had attended the Gavin Middle School, including a student population that was 31% special education and more than 30% English language learners as well. Here in Lawrence, we've had the opportunity to restart the Leonard Middle School, a Level 4 school, as Up Academy Lawrence Middle School. This year we are serving approximately 120 students in grade 6. Next year we will manage the full middle school serving approximately 360 students in grades 6 through 8. Notably, Up Academy Lawrence Middle School is not a charter school. Rather, the school has remained a traditional neighborhood district school. Enrollment is strictly determined by the residency address of a student. There is no lottery. This allows us to ensure that we're serving the same students who would have been attending the Leonard absent any intervention. We're really pleased by the work that has transpired at the Leonard and at Up Academy Lawrence Middle School so far this year. Over the summer, our school's leaders and some of our teachers met with all 120 families of the school, often in their home, sometimes at the school, to hear about the dreams that those families held for their children and to talk to them about our new program. Our extraordinarily dedicated team of teachers started 20 days before the school year so that they could prepare for the mighty task they had ahead of turning around the Leonard. Student enrollment at the school is significantly up relative to years in the past. Families who would have perhaps historically wavered out of the school instead decided to come and attend Up Academy Lawrence Middle School. If you were to walk into the school this morning or any day, you would see an environment of high academic expectations coupled with immense support. It's a joyous, structured environment. You would see students in the building until 3:30 in the afternoon. We have an 8-hour school day. You would see students in the building on Saturday mornings as well for Saturday Math Club. If you came to our school a couple of weeks ago, you would have had the opportunity to meet with our families during family conference night. We had over 85% of our families in attendance that evening, which was just a tremendous symbol of how dedicated our school's families are to the education of their children. And if you looked at our initial interim assessment results, which came out a few weeks ago, you would see that students are achieving and learning at levels that we believe have not been achieved before at the Leonard Middle School. Briefly, I just wanted to indicate that working with the Lawrence Public Schools Central Office and members of the Department of Education who've been involved has really been a breath of fresh air in this challenging turnaround environment and work. When we encounter inevitable challenges of the work, we work very closely with the central office to figure out solutions collaboratively in an efficient way. It's really what I would call a true partnership. That said, the work is not without challenges, and if I were to identify two things that are particularly challenging relative to operating a more traditional charter school, one I would say is just navigating the highly complex purchasing systems across the city of Lawrence, which make it challenging to deliver supplies in a timely manner to our school. And second is the relatively short length of our contract here in Lawrence. Relative to a more traditional charter term of 5 years, it makes it more difficult to make long-term investments in the school for the students, given that the future is more uncertain. And I'm happy to answer questions as they come up.
With your permission, we're going to do questions at the end after Alan's had a chance to talk. When we had a number of level 4 schools, and we took different interventions depending on what we thought they needed. Obviously, Up Academy is one type of intervention. A different type of intervention is what we call the transformational model, which I'm told the Merklin School in Lowell, and I'm really excited to hear more about what's happening in Lowell. My information was that they, turned over about half of their staff, which doesn't make it transformational, but regardless, that may not be accurate. I want to find out more. We're excited to hear about different ways to get great results for kids. This way that we did was a transformational model at the 2 high schools where the staff remained in place, but we brought in matched tutors, particularly given the difficult math scores that we saw in those 2 schools, to provide intensive tutoring to kids in those 2 particular high schools in the middle of the day. So it's like a standard course, and I've asked Alan from Match Education to come speak out about the program to tell you more.
Thank you, Superintendent. As some of you know, I worked at the department for 9 years, 100 times sitting in that front row with Rhoda and Jeff Wilson and others, and it's good to see my friends still here. Penny, good to see you too.
You miss it, right?
I love the work I'm doing now. So when I left the department 9 years ago, I went to work at Match, at that time a small charter high school in Boston. I met a young man, a freshman at that time, named Antonio Gutierrez, Jr. As he'll tell you himself, he's sitting to my right. He came in from a middle school as a C-, D+ student. Match turned him around. Part of what turned his life around were the tutors he had at Match, full-time people. He got a Posse scholarship, went to Union College, graduated with honors, came back and worked for City Year, and then came to work as the vice president of my new organization called Match Tutors. I'm very proud of him. So when Jeff asked us to come to Lawrence to work in 2 of the 6 high school divisions, these were the lowest performing ones, the level 4. We found when we came to Lawrence 2 terrific principals, Jerry Acosta at the International School and Carlene Pignato at the Business Management and Finance School. And our job was to go around the country and recruit talented people to come and tutor the kids in grades 9 and 10, one period of their schedule, in mathematics. So Antonio led that recruitment. We had 560 applicants from 38 states at 6 countries, from which we picked 50. So we were very selective in the people we'd want to put in front of the kids of Lawrence. We trained them for about 120 hours. Each day they get feedback from a site coordinator and an assistant coordinator at the schools so that they'll improve every day. If you came to visit our site, three blocks from here, you'll see right off the bat, I think, students are engaged. Because when they sit across the table, it's 1 tutor and 2 students for the full class period in a room full of other tutors and other students. And again, this is embedded in the day. It's not an after-school afterthought. It's an embedded course called Math Extended Learning for all the 9th and all the 10th graders in 2 of the 6 Lawrence schools. So the relationship that's built between the tutors and the students is really strong. We've been working now 3 months ago. Today was the first day of school in Lawrence, and I'd say the early data is encouraging. I think it's too early to say whether we'll reach the goals we have against 12 measures that we're holding ourselves accountable for and the superintendent is holding us accountable for, the largest of which are academic achievement. But there are really 3 things this program is bringing to the kids in those high schools. One is strong, personalized instruction on mathematics for the grade 9 and 10 students. That's our number 1 goal. Number 2 is, since our tutors call the parent and guardian of their student at least once a week, we're building greater connections between the parents, their children, and their fellow tutors in Lawrence. Third is, with these 50 people who otherwise wouldn't have come to Lawrence, they had other opportunities in these 38 states to find other jobs. We brought some talent into the school, and now some of those people would love to stay connected to the kids of Lawrence after this 1-year service year is completed. And Lawrence will have an opportunity, I think, as they look at people for different positions, to look at some of our tutors and say, those are terrific people who have done a great job in student achievement, a great job in parent connection, and a great job in terms of their kids feeling connected to school and committed to graduating. So briefly, Antonio Gutierrez.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Antonio. What's really important to understand about what we're doing is the fact that we're not just math intervention, right? This is relationship-driven intervention, right? Because each fellow has a personal caseload of students they're working with all year long. They get to build those meaningful relationships with them. For me as a student, especially as a first-generation college student, not knowing what it's like to be in college, how to take notes, what resources I can tap into, my tutors serve as that role model for me, right? And I remember my tutor calling home regularly and just seeing my mother shaking her head, yes, I know what's going on in school, and I'm shaking my head, no, she knows I didn't do my homework on Wednesday. That is an extraordinary thing. And the idea is, making, education a personal journey, a personal experience for the families and for the students. And although I think we're in the early stages of this whole idea, I think there's a lot of promise to what we're doing and to helping students get the skills they need to be successful in college and helping parents and families feel connected to the school.
Questions?
Okay, I think David would like to lead off. Oh, I'm sorry, the commissioner asked if he could make a comment.
If I could just, I just want to acknowledge, because I've talked about the tremendous respect I have for the work that Jeff's doing, but I want to acknowledge with Scott at the table, Alan, Antonio, there are three that we're referring to them as education management organizations. That's where EMO comes from. In each case, Scott Givens with Unlocking Potential, Lawrence Community Day, and Phoenix, where those folks have gotten their successes in the charter school world. They've all been very successful charter school operators under the autonomy that the charter school law of the Commonwealth provides. In the case of Match, which and Alan will do justice to sort of describing how the tutoring component of that became sort of an offshoot of the school. The Match has some experience working in traditional school districts, done some great work in a number of places. I'm familiar with the work in Houston, for example. But to these operators, they've taken a huge risk to come to Lawrence. Scott gave you a little bit of a flavor of this. They've achieved their success in the autonomies of the charter school space. And so it was a risk for them to take on an existing school. It's not starting a new school. It's not having a lottery to find your students. You get the students you've got. You get the teachers you've got. And I just want to acknowledge that and express my respect for that. There are a number of features that I think some are statutory that I would like to see us address. One of them is that 3-year. Our read on the procurement statutes in the state are that Lawrence cannot offer any of these folks anything more than a 3-year contract, and that makes it even tougher for a successful operator somewhere else to think about taking on a school in Lawrence, because it's a tremendous investment up front, and it may take a couple of years to see it play forward. So I'm very much committed to clearing the way for successful operators to be part of our turnaround strategy. The final point I'd like to make to the board is that we are investing in 4, 5, 6 groups that have demonstrated success in running successful schools in high poverty areas. Unlocking Potential is one of them. And investing in them with our Race to the Top funds, with the expectation that they will continue to be part of our strategy and be available to help us as we go forward, both with Level 4 schools and eventually with Level 5 schools. When it gets to a receivership decision, we expect that part of the path forward under a receivership model will be to tap into these successful, what I'll call education management organizations. So we're very purposely investing in them, helping to see them expand their capacity to take on more on behalf of the state and behalf of our school districts. Finally, these are all, I believe all, and there may be an exception, these are all Massachusetts-based folks who have cut their eye teeth here in Massachusetts and have demonstrated their success, who could be anywhere else but Massachusetts. And I know that that they've been enticed to be places other than Massachusetts. So I think we're very fortunate to have them with us.
I think the Secretary would also like to make a comment, and then we'll go to David's question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
See how polite they are on this board, Penny?
I was just eager to have the board get an opportunity to interact with the panel before our time expires here. So, yeah, okay. So, first of all, I want to commend you for the courage and sacrifices that you've all made to participate in this really important work as we, as a Commonwealth, try to intervene in a school district in ways that we haven't been able to do before, with powers that we haven't had before, with supports that we haven't had before, and so I commend you for the efforts that we've heard about, and we're very eager to see those be successful. I'm curious if you would respond, because we heard, as you heard, testimony this morning from both parents of special needs students and the union here locally who chose not to participate for reasons that baffle me on the panel, but nonetheless, what your response is to what you heard, Jeff, this morning.
So I think, change is hard. There's no question about it. It's interesting, the union's stance of late. It's been fairly cooperative, for the beginning of the receivership. We've asked some former charter schools to come in and work inside the district as AFT union members. For those of you who remember, charter schools were actually set up initially as laboratories of innovation that were always supposed to come back into the traditional public schools. Somewhere along the line, a schism happened, and it seems to be one side or the other. I'm only interested in good results for kids, and so I wanted to create a structure whereby we would take some of these schools and have them come in inside of a school district, inside of a unionized school district, in a place where there is no lottery, where they take the neighborhood kids. And, as I said earlier, we're in preliminary talks about a union school. All I want is good schools for kids, and people are so bound by the traditional system of how we operate in education. This is very different. So I think some of the union's concern is based more on the unknown than the actual. I think there's some trepidation regarding what exactly is going on. But the reality is, as many of you know, my school, when I was a principal, was held up as the counterexample by no less than Randi Weingarten herself in the New York Times as the counter argument to charter schools. So what I'm here to say is I'm not interested in that fight. I'm only interested in good schools. I believe it should be under the umbrella of a unionized system. What exactly that looks like, we're going to work that out. But I think it can be worked out, and I'm anxious to continue working with the union to do it. I saw friends from the Boston Teachers Union here today that I've fought with in the past, but we still get along well. And we're not always going to agree on every issue, but at the end of the day, I think we want to work cooperatively with them. In regards to the parents who came to speak about the autism program, we have, as they've mentioned, poured additional resources over the last several years into that programming. We are going to continue as needed, as directed under federal law, to give our kids the resources they need. It is a work in progress. We are not finished. We hired a new special education director last year, and we are in the process of doing a deep assessment on our special education programming, and you will be seeing changes.
Comment, Madam Chair. It seems to me that there's enormous potential for a win-win situation here between labor and management. And I think the theme's been enunciated by some of the people who testified to us. It's the empowerment of teachers. And it seems to me to be wholly consistent with the plan that you've outlined to grant greater autonomy to these schools and have teachers in their professional judgment. Indeed, this is the philosophy of innovation schools. Teachers in their judgment make the key strategic decisions on education as close to the ground as possible, as close to the students as possible, and then give them the flexibility, not standardized the way the Commissioner pointed to earlier, but give them the flexibility in each environment to design the program that they as professionals think best suit the needs of their students. So it seems to me that in that area there's an enormous opportunity for a positive situation for everyone, especially the students, to come out of this.
I think we're just really excited to continue the work. We are just kind of redistributing the power more down to the teacher level versus towards the leadership of the union, perhaps, and that may be where some of the conflict is. But I think there's room at the table for everyone. We want to do this with the union, not against the union, and we will continue that mindset.
Well, I commend you for that. Finally, there was a general point made on parental involvement, which I think was very well spoken, and I appreciated that commentary. I do hope that the needs of those children with the parents of children with disabilities are addressed. I heard from your testimony that you're on the way to doing that, and I know you care about that as much as we do.
Thank you.
Thanks. I have one comment and then two questions, if I could, and they're related. The comment is I was taken by the folks from Match and their comments about the relationships that are key to their approach and strategy to working with the freshmen and sophomores around math. Now, this marks the second time we've had presentations here. We go back to June, where our Teacher of the Year was a math teacher, and we sat and listened to his report to us was all about relationships. At that meeting, we remember that we also had a report of our first virtual school in Greenfield, and it was a stark contrast at that time to me, the difference. And I just think this is, in terms of our own interest around this whole potential of technology that we keep talking about, to be very watchful about it, because once again we hear about the importance of the relationships between the adults that are working with the kids and the importance of that human interaction. So I just make that as an observation. Second time now should present some cautions to us when we hear about the wonders of these virtual opportunities in terms of education. So that's point one. Point two, Alan, just quickly, what's the relationship? I assume every kid has a math teacher, right? Correct? All the kids you're tutoring.
Sure, they're all enrolled in the regular math.
So what is the relationship between the math teachers and the math tutors in the two schools you're working in?
Yeah, great question. So we have a 6-year veteran teacher, high school math teacher, who's the developer of our curriculum and the overseer of our curriculum. She's the liaison to the teachers who teach 11 different math classes across the 2 schools. And her job is to try to get the tutorial curriculum to support that classroom teaching as closely aligned as she can. So individual tutors are given notes through our math coordinator from a math teacher saying, could you work with this set of kids on the following material the next week? That's a very good piece. Our math curriculum teacher sits in on the math department meetings to try to collaborate closely, understand when tests are coming up, understand the scope and sequence that the teacher is following to try to align it closely. That's been going well, I think.
Is that the beginning of what potentially can be a broader working relationship between the folks here that have a longstanding commitment to the schools and some of the new folks that are coming in? Is there potential in that interaction? Jeff, I guess I'd ask you that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've already seen it. I mean, I think the math teachers appreciate the fact that their students have a chance to get fix some skills, to really get some extra support regarding what they're teaching. And so those, was it last week I was on a tour where the teachers came to come visit and see exactly what was happening in those tutoring sessions. And the relationship between the teacher and the tutor, because it's been positive, is, it's a synergistic effect, in my opinion. I mean, I think you really have a chance to really fix the gaps that kids are coming with.
And so the broader question coming out of that, and it's a response to something you said in your presentation, you said that sometimes one of the issues in terms of the response of the union was they aren't sure what's coming. So it begs the question of what is the communication between yourself and the union leadership, and how involved are they in terms of that kind of understanding the initiatives? How is the communication, very honestly? How transparent do you think folks are when talking about the issues that matter to the teachers in the city?
So I think we have a pretty good working relationship. Frank McLaughlin is a talented educator and cares deeply about the kids. I talk to him regularly. I would say that, we've tried to embrace them with open arms. This idea about a union school, that's been done in other places, a potential EMO in the future is something that's interesting to me. I am looking for people to rally around the schools and make them better. And I think the union is not sure right now exactly what their stance is with us, but we want to work with them, and we will continue to work with them.
Thanks.
Vanessa, you had a question, and then Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's quite impressive to see, all the efforts, and I'm very excited to hear at the end of this year what kind of progress has been achieved and outcomes attained after all these wonderful efforts. So good luck and Godspeed. I have a couple of questions. I was really very interested in the presentation that Ana Javier gave, or the testimony that she presented in terms of the parents' leadership, which we all know how important it is. So I have a question about how are you and the school is engaging parents through her organization or otherwise to really keep them. I heard that 85% of your parents came to parent night, etc. But, those are very good strategies, but what is the broader strategy to really engage parents? And the second question is, given the demographics of the city of Lawrence, I am very interested to hear from you, Jeff, what is the strategy to develop internal leadership in the school system up and down the ranks, so the leadership in the schools represent the demographics of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's begin with the parents. I think, as I said, when I came here, the reputation was that the parents didn't care about their kids. I couldn't disagree with that assertion more. Parents of Lawrence love their kids deeply. When I kind of did my assessment, I thought that the schools weren't doing enough to welcome parents in, and that some schools were amazingly good at it, and parents felt welcome when they came in. Other schools, parents felt like they were just supposed to drop their kid off at the door. And so we're working with our principals to try to change that culture. As I talked about a little bit earlier,